Hello everyone, this is part 15 of What If Deku Was the Chainsaw Man, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. It's a warm touch, searing into his skin, from the sweltering sun reaching out by the means of golden beams for arms. Sweat streaks down his face and under his clothes. Under the glare of the broad window opposing him, Izuku feels as though he's standing in hell rather than Mikima's office. Perhaps those two places are one in the same as he sees her sin shining through. The woman's heels suspend her over the view of the city, but she doesn't quite reach the skyline, a halo of light above her head, and the shadow of Hawk's wings making her appear as a fallen angel. Izuku glances over at his mentor, the hero having tagged along for the boys' mission debrief. A heavy silence hangs over the room, the weight making Izuku shift uncomfortably. He doesn't know whether to be grateful or not when Mikima unsettles the hushed environment by finally addressing him. I believe it is safe to assume from Sir Nightie's absence that there were casualties. She levels her gaze with Izuku's by leaning forward. Her hands place themselves atop her desk, bracing her bend as she's propped up by her arms. Shimmering swirls in the woman's eyes reflect against the sun shining behind her. He'd be hypnotized if not from the predatory sheen to them. He dry swallows, but tastes the salt of his own sweat on his lips. Yes, the answer comes easy since it's the truth, but that doesn't make it any less painful of a thing to say. Izuku hangs his head, mourning the mental image of Naitie slowly bleeding out. He hadn't known the hero personally, nor as an acquaintance for very long, but he still feels somewhat responsible. Mikima shifts her hips to lean more on her right, tilting her head with the slight change to maintain contact with Izuku's eye level. He can't help but glance up, meeting her gaze again. Should I be led to believe that you were the only survivor of the team that was dispatched? The HPSC director's next question makes him look away from her just as quickly. Izuku is not only aware of Mikima's gaze, but he can now feel Hawk staring at him as well. He's hesitant to respond, though there's an immense pressure to answer sooner rather than later. Yes, the reluctance makes his voice waver, but he hardens his eyes to compensate when returning them to meet Mikima's. She holds his gaze, searching for any cracks in the tough act. None of Nightie's agency made it out. Her reiteration of the previous question is a way of telling him that she isn't quite convinced by the performance. When she stops supporting herself against her desk and returns to her full height, she stands over him with a more critical stare. The rings in her eyes spiral like the shadows casted by the sun, dimming the room's atmosphere. Izuku stiffens, standing a little straighter to match the director's posture. He finds it in himself to look her in the eyes and speak with a voice as solid as his stare. No, ma'am, not to my knowledge. The sturdy stance holds well against Mikima's judgmental stature. They find themselves locked in a stalemate, neither one folding first. Mikima hums. When she sits down in her office chair, Izuku allows his shoulders to stoop. And what of the Yakuza? Her slight change in questioning helps him quell his concerns a little more. As such, he takes her sitting down as an invitation to do the same, stealing the seat across from her. I didn't kill any of them. His personal report is again the truth, but it's not like he was a witness to everything either. I can't speak for Naitie and the others. Chisaki was a bit of a special case that he can only presume there might have been other instances of lethal force. Considering Izuku had a close call of his own when up against Stain 2.0, he can't say he blames anybody for exercising a lack of restraint. Mikima nods, accepting that answer. What comes next, however, is a return to the interrogation. And what of the girl that the Yakuza had in their possession? You were unable to retrieve her. Izuku curses himself for letting his guard down as he grips his seat's armrests. Mikima has that analytical glint to her gaze again, not allowing the boy any time to pause in his responses. No, the answer comes out a little too hastily and way too forced. Hoping to smooth things over with some careful clarification, he tries and fails to not stutter while explaining. I think she died in the wreckage. A mental recollection of the collapsing tunnel helps him to sell his point of view, but he still wasn't ready to answer that question quite yet. Oh. Mikima's eyes narrow into a focused stare as she asks, what makes you think that? Hawks glances between his protege and his boss, working up the nerve to step in between them in order to interject. He comes to Izuku's defense, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. I think he's been through enough already that. Hawks, but Mikima's critically sharp tone cuts through the hero's words as promptly as her glare does. She stops him in his tracks, gesturing to the exit behind him. Would you be as kind to leave the room and provide us with a moment of privacy? Her request is more of a direct order that ruffles the man's feathers. Hawks steps back, faltering. His hand slips off of Izuku's shoulder, his body swaying between staying and leaving. His face scrunches into a strenuous expression, but, seeing as how you weren't a part of the mission that took place, I don't think you have much to add to this debrief. Mikima interrupts him with another manner of speaking that pierces straight through him. You were allowed to join us as a courtesy, but that right is now revoked. And that does it. Hawks must give in to defeat. He gives Izuku a parting look, one to convey he's sorry. He closes the door on the way out as he promises the very least he can do, I'll be right outside, kid. Once they're alone, Mikima stands up again to address Izuku. The HPSC recovered the remains of Kai Chisaki and his 8 bullets. She gradually works her way around her desk to close the short gap between them. I had a team scour the tunnels and retrieve the bodies of Sir Nightie's sidekicks as well. The close proximity makes the boy flinch when she says, I find it odd that your story states there were complete casualties when there are 2 corpses missing. Missing, he can't help but squirm under her gaze. The tie around his neck feels too constricting, leading to him loosening it with a small tug. Mikima nods while she leans her backside against her desk, half sitting and half standing as she crosses her legs. Mirio Togata and the girl that Chisaki had in his possession, the redhead raises a single eyebrow, you know nothing. There's no more beating around the bush. He sighs. His head hangs until the only way to keep it from falling is placing it in his hands. I saw Lemurian lose an arm in his fight with Chisaki, as well as get stabbed various times. The gruesome battle replays in his head as he recollects the events that transpired in the Yakuza base. Mikima brings a hand to her chin, index finger settling atop her lip, making her appear as Asui usually would when she thinks. That would explain the traces of DNA we found. She prompts Izuku to continue with his story. He lost a good amount of blood, but that's all there is to tell when he sits up straight again to say, I don't think anyone could survive that. Whatever expression he's making must be convincing enough since his superior doesn't press the issue. Perhaps, she leaves the matter of Mirio alone. Instead, she leans back into asking about the other missing person. She asks about Eri, and the girl. The sun encases the room in a ray of light as clouds part, the windows glare brighter than ever. Enveloped by the blinding beams, Izuku steels himself and answers, I have no idea where she is. Mikima covers her mouth with her hand, stifling some sort of noise she makes. Momentarily, Izuku thinks that she's coughing. However, when her hand slips away to unveil a smile on her lips, it's then that he realizes that the woman is laughing. She uncrosses her legs, standing up as she reverts to her serious state. And asks, are you lying to me, Izuku Midoriya? Izuku stares up at her, perturbed as he is unsettled. He swallows the last of his resolve to answer. As far as anyone knows, everybody involved died. Mikima's head tilts to the side, her smile staying on her face. As far as anyone knows, the raid never even happened. Izuku's jaw loosens, his mouth gaping. He struggles at first, but manages to get it working again to ask in a hushed tone, no funerals. We'll notify and inform family. Mikima waves away his concern. He tries to track her when she begins moving. But she works her way behind him. You did well for your first mission, considering the circumstances. Her hands place themselves on his shoulders. Polished nails trace his deltoids. Don't be too hard on yourself. I'm not. Izuku tenses at her touch. When the woman's voice draws closer to his ear, a shiver runs down his spine despite the warmth of her breath. Good boy, Mikima's whisper sounds as loud as ever. You all did good. Aizawa addresses his class from the front of the room. Each student looks at their individual handouts, exam scores discreetly disclosed. Some of you performed better than others, but, well done. It's a broad overview, but it's a fact that the teacher can be very proud of. He allows himself a small smile. But that smile doesn't last very long. Ashido shoots up from her seat, an arm raised in the air despite already asking her question as an outbursting disruption. Does that mean we all get to go to the summer camp? Aizawa tries to tame his temper as he grates out through gritted teeth. Yes, she should know better from all her previous reprimandings to wait and be called on. A vein bulges from the man's forehead when the rest of the room gets just as rowdy. A chorus of cheers washes over the class like a wave. He waits for them to simmer down, performing breathing exercises to maintain his sanity. You were all going anyways, the tired teacher exhales when the children finally settle back into place. But he relaxed too soon. As an underground hero, he should have known better than to lower his guard. What? Sero screams and starts another uproar. Was this another one of your logical ruses? Uraraka nervously glances around like somebody is bound to spring a pop quiz on her. With the way his class is misbehaving, Aizawa considers making her fear a rational reality. Instead, the man sighs and shakes his head. No, the summer camp is a good opportunity to strengthen your quirks. He opens a desk drawer to grab a grape juice pouch. The energy drink may as well be a substitute for alcohol at this point. We would have simply placed you in extracurricular remedials if you had scored low on your exams. Ojiro shares a look with Kaminari and Ashido, a single sweat drop rolling down his forehead. The blonde wipes it away with his tail as he laughs. We made it by the skin of our teeth, huh? Aizawa rolls his eyes, sleep deprivation nearly making them get stuck in the back of his head. Now that you know, make sure you're all prepared for the trip. The tired teacher pauses to slurp on the straw of his juice pouch before adding, "You're dismissed." With class over, he collapses into his sleeping bag and hopes to forget about his problem children for a few hours. Sato swivels from watching his sensei pass out to searching his class for somebody who can answer him. How are we supposed to prepare? What does that mean? It means we should make a trip to the mall. Ashido shoots from her seat to latch onto the boy and put him in a headlock. Already claiming her first victim, she scours the others for her next target. Ooh, yeah, let's all go together. Hagakure hops around to collect Shoji and Tokiyami as the Pinket's partner in crime. Though invisible, the girl shares a grin with her friend. Shinso shrugs his backpack over one shoulder by a single strap. Hard pass, the boy is just about to slip out of the room but makes the mistake of walking past Kaminari. Come on, bro, don't be a downer. The blonde moves as briskly as lightning to catch Shinso. Kaminari ropes his peer in with an arm draped across the boy's shoulders. Kirishima flashes his friend a thumbs up before gesturing with it towards another blonde. Even Bakubro is gonna come. The redhead gives one of his patented shark-toothed grins as an extra boost of encouragement. Bakugo scoffs, brushing him off. I'm only tagging along because I needed shit anyways, he objects but only with a slight grumble and growl. See, Kirishima takes that as a sign of victory anyways, which also manages to convince Todoroki for some reason, much to Ashido's elation. Asui performs her signature frog-like pose, squatting in her seat with a curious touch to her chin as she asks, "Are you coming too, Jiro?" The girl flinches at the mention of her existence, all eyes turning to look at her. She shrugs, toying with an ear jack. Oh, I dunno, the indecisive girl avoids meeting anyone's gaze. It'll be my treat, until Yaoyorozu comes to her aid. The class representative offers her friend a small smile. All Jiro can do is sigh and agree with a nod. I guess I can't say no to that. The class collectively cheers. Ashido pats Jiro on the back, at a girl. A familiar little girl looks around with wide red eyes. The airport is a cocoon of steel, the walls elegantly curving to wrap around everything, but not in the way that the Yakuza tunnels did. This place is supported by structural beams, separated by broad windows that let in the light of the world. People move with the sun, casting colors to create a moving rainbow. The flow from check-in desks to ticket lines is a constant flux of commotion unlike the reclusive underground of the Yakuza. Eri's eyes twinkle in the daylight. She swivels her tiny head to gaze up at the blonde boy that brought her here. He's kind like the Chainsaw Boy. He fought to rescue and free her like the Chainsaw Boy. He even lost one of his arms for her. Veteran, a lady behind a counter asks him about the missing appendage. But he doesn't look upset about it. If anything, the shiny white-toothed grin he's always flashing grows even bigger. Not exactly, Mirio laughs as he hands the woman his passport. Eri clings to the boy's leg, hugging him apologetically even if he isn't angry with her for costing him a body part. He places his remaining hand atop her head, combing his fingers through her hair. He's not out of action quite yet. As a matter of fact, once he gets this little girl to safety, he'll be back to save another million. Hawks taps the toe of his shoe against the hard metal floor, eliciting a light pang with every smack. He's got his hand pressed into the grooves of his chin and cheekbones, the hero deep in thought. He hums with his rumination while his protege watches. Izuku stands across from his mentor, crossing his arms as he waits for the man to finish thinking. They both occupy the otherwise empty training room, sporting attire meant for exercise while otherwise simply standing around. Truth be told, kid, I was planning on teaching you how to get stronger anyways. Hawks shrugs as he breaks his concentration to fix Izuku with an expression that creases the space between his eyes. I'm just not sure what it is that you're really asking me to do for you here. Izuku nearly throws his hands up in the air, but they wind up flopping at his sides. He hangs his head, shoulders slumping too, as defeat brings his mood all the way down. Even with the training and the experience that I've had so far, it just wasn't enough to stand a chance. He doesn't have to dwell on his fight with the modified version of Stain to remember his lack of power. I'm telling you that I'm no match for whatever I encountered down in those tunnels. I'm out of my league. Hawks raises his eyebrows, somehow only now surprised to hear such a reflection. Despite having heard once before about his protege being at death's door, it seems to finally be setting in. If someone with Izuku's capabilities was completely outmatched, it spells a recipe for disaster. Even if the boy is no all-might level combatant, this is something to be concerned about. And you didn't tell this to Makima. He makes sure that it's a matter kept between only he and the kid. No way, Izuku fervently shakes his head. Hawks nods his, glad to hear that. It's important for us to keep a few things to ourselves. Hawks places his hands on his hips as he reevaluates everything that Izuku confided in him with. Your secret is safe with me. Izuku scratches a spot behind his ear, giving his mentor a pointed look. Thanks, but you still aren't telling me what I should do about it. He expectantly tilts his head as he waits for something useful. Right, Hawks holds back a laugh when he remembers this is a serious situation. His arms move from his hips to cross behind his head to make a pillow of sorts. I've not exactly got an arch nemesis of my own quite yet, but it might be a good idea to treat this thing like a rival. He goes with the first bit of advice that he can think of. I need to improve myself faster to beat it. Izuku nods along while considering his mentor's suggestion. It seems simple enough but oddly wise. Bingo, Hawks grins when he sees he happened to give solid advice. Hoping to capitalize on it, he beats his wings to lift off the ground and keeps going. We'll work harder to master your chain control today rather than taking it slow. Today, Izuku whips his head up to look at Hawks. The hero nods, no time like the present, right. When he gestures around the place, he rotates his body to do so fully. I mean, we are already in the training room. This time he lets himself laugh a little. Izuku laughs along, loosening up a bit both mentally and physically as he stretches a little. Right, let's do it. His fingers reach for the ripcord on his chest so that they can begin training. If the ground has a pulse, Kyoka can hear it as much as she can see it rise through the mountains. Fortunate enough to have gotten a window seat on the bus to UA's summer retreat, she revels in the bold silhouette of greenery. Every peak of trees line in a formation that would read like a doctor's graph. She listens beyond the wheels on the backroad path and the commotion of her classmates, still hearing that thrumming from the earth. It's soothing enough to make her body reflexively relax against the cushioning of her seat. Beside the girl, her friend reads a book of some kind. Momo licks her thumb before using it to turn a page. It seems the class pres has her own way of tuning out Mina and the others. It's astonishing their sensei hasn't blown a gasket yet since he's not got much to distract himself with by comparison. The teacher's eye twitches when a wadded ball of paper hits him upside the head. Kirishima and Bakugo receive cheers as they arm wrestle. Kaminari is chasing Ojiro's tail around, eliciting some shouts of his own. It's all chaos and no order while Tokiyami mutters something about finding revelry in the dark. Yet, Momo reads her novel and Kyoka spaces out somehow. That only lasts so long before the bus comes to an abrupt screeching stop. Between Mina's repent of asking, "Are we there yet?" and singing, "Wheels on the bus," everyone is shaken when she asks how they already reached the destination. Then again, they have to admit that the trip was relatively short. While Class 1A unloads from the transport vehicle, they start to also wonder why they're parked on the side of a hill with no campsite in sight. They nervously and curiously glance around, trying to figure out what's going on. Is this some sort of rest stop? Sero's suggestion is met with mixed responses of approval or disbelief. He shrugs, not so sure of his own guess at an explanation. What kind of rest stop doesn't have a bathroom? Uraraka's question only adds to the group's confusion. They wind up turning to look at their teacher for an answer. The whole class shudders from a shiver despite the summer sun blaring down on them. Aizawa has a grin that exposes more teeth than All Might's signature smile. It's then that they realize the man is about to get his revenge for all the suffering he had to endure on the ride here. Get back on the bus, someone shouts to warn the others of what they already figured out. But it's too late. The ground beneath their feet crumbles and they begin falling from the mountain down into a valley of shrubbery. Your lodging is on the foot of the mountain beyond this peak. Aizawa's voice carries itself down the hill with his class as he speaks. The training has already begun. Consider this summer getaway more like a boot camp. Not cool. Hagako's cry falls on deaf ears as the landslide washes over her yell. Aizawa steps up to the ledge of what remains from the cliff. Behind him are the owners of the land, the wild cats. They're the ones responsible for shifting the earth to make this bait and switch possible, but that's just another surprise waiting for his class once they make it to base camp. Izuku flails with his arms, chains whipping uncontrollably. He's lost track of how many attempts he's made, but the open space coupled with Hawk's evasion always results with the same conclusion. His chains whack the ground, loosening upon impact. Izuku reels them back in, arm bars treading with traction minimizing each time. It's no use, he's not one to give up, but he knows that this practice is proving futile if he's ever going to hope to beat Stain 2.0 in a fight. Don't say that, Hawks tries to gently assure him, but Izuku shakes his head while scoffing. It took me years to reach the level I'm at. The hero's efforts to help only make the boy more so scorned, since time is something they don't have the luxury of. I need to fight fire with fire. Izuku swings his bladed limbs up to look at them more closely. If I face him with equal footing, then maybe I can beat him at his own game. Hawk sighs, slowing the flap of his wings so that he descends. That'd be suicide. The hero steps forward to grab his protege by the shoulders and shake some sense into the kid. He has years of experience as a swordsman that you won't be able to catch up to. But Izuku remains adamant, his mind wandering elsewhere. The first fight he had with Stain nearly costed him his life too, if not for the techniques he learned from Kyoka. While those maneuvers might not work a second time, they're instilled in him as something he can improve upon. So long as I have a good teacher, I can do it. The boy's whisper is one he wishes Kyoka could hear. Hawks hears it instead, staring at his protege with awe. After a while, the man smiles and nods. Fine, he lets the boy go and backs away. Let's forget the chain control then. Izuku blinks back to the present, looking up at his mentor. The hero plucks 2 feathers from each wing, the plumes extending into sharpened quills. Hawk's dual wields a set of self-made swords, crossing them in front of his chest. Let's have ourselves a good old-fashioned duel. Hawks beckons the boy forth. Izuku obliges, swinging his chainsaws the way that they were meant to be used. If you ever wake up from a dream confused, know that it's because there is no more disorienting thing than living in reality. Bubbles burst as they rise to the surface of a Nomu preservation tank. Suspended by tubes feeding into him, supplying him with oxygen just as electrical wires transfer energy into his modified body, Chitsu Makaguro is mildly aware of his supported system. The way that there's no ground for his feet to reach whilst he floats in a bath of chemicals is disorientating. That's the only way to describe his constant dream-like state as of late, a foggy daze just on the brink of delusion. He's in a constant flux of fighting but feels as though he surrendered his freedom to fight of his own conviction. Eyes closed, he allows himself to lull to sleep. He does so as he thinks about the wool of his blades. He remembers the importance of conviction to a cause. The aching in his limbs ebbs and flows like a tide. Yet, the saliva in his mouth has dried just like the blood crusted around his wounds. What scars aren't exposed are wrapped in bandages, stained red by the liquid that bled through the gauze. His head throbs and his vision stirs when he tries sitting up. Instantaneously, he lays back down with a groan. Faintly at first, the childish form of Chitsu Makaguro hears a deep voice coming from his left. His ears tune in when he turns his head to look in the direction of the source, the sound much clearer then. I was beginning to wonder if you'd ever wake up. Someone was alerted to Akaguro's discomforted noises. Akaguro squints to see who. but his eyes are still too bleary to make anything out just yet. Not to mention the slender shape is squatting in a shadowed corner with their back turned. Who are you? The boy strains to ask his question just as much as he struggles to get a good look at the other person occupying the room. What he gets in response is an amused grunt. Akaguro isn't sure why the stranger finds that line of questioning so funny. Until he sees the shimmer of steel across the person's crisscrossed legs. It looks like a sword, the motion of the figure's arm polishing the blade. In his current state and making out that type of weapon at the very least, Akaguro isn't expecting the person's response to be, "I'm the man that saved your life." Akaguro's eyes flick between the katana and his wounds. A combination of shallow and deep gashes along his body tells a different story. Then again, he is resting on a cot with bandages to cover those injuries. Uncertain of what to say or do, he settles for a wobbly, "Thanks." The stranger grunts again in some form of acknowledgement before gesturing with a back tilt of their head, drink, getting Akaguro to turn his own head the other way momentarily. A metallic canteen sits beside him on a stool that's been turned into a makeshift nightstand. Akaguro must take too long with his indecision to take it since the voice he's gotten accustomed to adds, "I would have left you to bleed out instead of poisoning you if I wanted you dead." And Akaguro has to admit that his self-proclaimed savior does have a point there. He figures he could have also been slain in his sleep. After one more second of hesitancy, the boy takes a swig from the canteen to wet his parched mouth. It's only then that he realizes how thirsty he is. Gradually, he goes from sips to greedily downing the entire tin of water. Once he's finished, Akaguro wipes his dripping chin with the back of his hand. Then he turns his head back towards the stranger in the shadows. He musters up the courage to ask, "So, why did you save me?" While still trying to peer through the dark in order to identify his supposed rescuer. "You're not any hero that I recognize." This time, Akaguro gets a humid huff instead of a grunt. Though the response that the injured boy gets isn't very much of a laughing matter to him. "Yeah. I'm far from a hero, kid." Chills run down the base of the boy's back as whatever blood hasn't been spilled from his body turns cold at the implications of that statement. Any so-called hero would have dumped you off at a hospital and left you to be somebody else's problem on a good night. There's a hint of disdain in the anti-hero's tone that gives Akaguro even more goosebumps. He's not sure if he even wants to know the answer, so Akaguro dithers a little before asking through bated breath and a stutter, "If you aren't a hero. Then who are you?" That's when the figure finally stands tall and unveils themselves from the confines of the shadows. Slightly hunched, and still missing a nose like the nostrils of a skull, Akaguro recognizes the cloaked Grim Reaper visage. Crazed eyes match the man's unruly tangle of hair, but his tone speaks with a premeditated and calculative mind. "I'm the one who keeps them in line," Death Incarnate says with pride. Akaguro opens his mouth to respond, but there's a lump in his throat that has lodged itself too tight. That familiar cold shiver running down his spine creeps out in the form of sweat, dampening the gauze wrapped around his trembling frame. The boy puts a name to a face. He recognizes the man towering over him not just from last night, but puts two and two together via reputation in the media. Akaguro finally finds his voice and manages to say, "Why, you're the hero killer." Stain, the expression on the man's face confirming the identification. Stain nonchalantly sheathes his katana, as though the action is as casual as having a seat. Sensing the kid's anxiety based on his sheer presence alone, the hero killer tries not to over-exaggerate, rolling his eyes. "Don't expect any autographs, kid." He takes a subtle step back to ease the tension a little, for the squeamish boy's sake. Akaguro tries crawling back on the bed in an attempt to increase that distance between them, but his wounds burn in protest. His eyes fall to his lap as he stammers out, but, why?" Afraid to take his eyes off the hero killer for too long, he glances back up with tears brimming the edges of his vision. "Why would a villain save my life?" Stain's face scrunches into a frown for a split second, akin to a flinch. And then the hero killer growls out a response upon being labeled a criminal. "Once you see the world as it is, you become villainous," but Akaguro has to strain a little to hear. Brushing off the low tone, Stain speaks louder to say the next part of his response, "You're strong-willed to have carried yourself the way you did last night. I wanted to know if what I saw was true." But Akaguro is still at a loss for words and belief. His timid tremble doesn't diminish in the slightest as he pushes through the pain to draw his knees up to his chest. What do you mean?" His voice squeaks as meek as a mouse. Stain tilts his head, taking in the poor sight. He inspects the weak and frightened child with an interest that looks beyond what's on the surface. There's something he's searching for within the thin frame of the kid, behind all those bandages and tears. The judge, jury, and executioner of Hero Society hums in contemplation before prompting the boy to speak. Tell me, do you wish to be a hero? And what Stain was looking for can be found within the boy's eyes. The faintest glimmer within the red orbs that unconsciously react to that question. The kid's gaze hardens with a resolve that doesn't match the rest of his body. But Stain knows what the boy's answer is before it's given, of course. Just like every other kid your age. It's to be expected, Stain won't settle for a brat's pipe dream lacking authentic ambition though, but I want to know why you want to be a hero so badly. The rephrasing and specification catches Akaguro by surprise, making him falter. His hands clench his knees as he racks his brain for the correct answer. But nothing comes. Money. Fame. Stain throws out some suggestions to test the waters. If the boy has superficial reasons for chasing the hero fantasy, then he'll surely bite at the bait. No, none of that, but Akaguro has a knee-jerk reaction to deny those intentions. He reacts almost violently in the way he snaps, something Stain notes internally. It's possible Akaguro has similar convictions to him about being a hero. Buried deep down. Which is odd when that vengeful side doesn't match what the boy says next. I want to save people with a smile. Stain his head curiously, interested to know what that means and quietly asking for elaboration. Akaguro obliges, like All Might. Stain grins at the mention of the number one hero. All Might. Now there's a true hero. He agrees that the man who solidified himself as the symbol of peace deserves the idolization. You've got good taste, kid. Speaking of taste, Stain stops when he's reminded of the bitter pills he kept out for the boy's treatment. He grabs a few to hand over. Here. Take these. It'll help with the pain. Akaguro tentatively takes them, hand shaking. He swallows the medication before daring to ask, why do you care so much? Because no one else will. Stain's immediate response freezes the already chilled blood within Akaguro's veins. And the weight of those words crushes the metaphorical ice, breaking the boy down. The child shivers, half expecting condensation in the air as he breathes through his mouth. Stain then asks, are you blinded by hero worship like the other children your age? Something about the way Stain said that sounded like an accusation, almost offending the boy. So the boy retorts with what he believes is the perfect validation. Heroes deserve to be idolized for the good that they do. The hero killer shakes his head in disapproval. It's hard to catch what he says, but Akaguro swears he hears Stain muttering something under his breath. It's always the most brilliant minds that are the most damaged. The quiet grumbling is just barely decipherable. If he could hear what was said, he would wonder who the hero killer was referring to, not considering himself. Heroes put their lives on the line for us. To protect us. Save us. Akaguro suddenly gets the urge to defend his idols. He feels they're being unrightfully looked down upon. But it's only after he's already shouted his argument that he realizes who he's yelling at. He recoils, reminded to be afraid, very much afraid. He's in the presence of a villain. He stammers a little quieter as he loses his bravado. They put others before themselves. Much to his relief, Stain doesn't appear displeased by the outburst. If anything, Stain looks delighted. At least you know what the definition of a true hero is. He agrees with Akaguro's sentiment to some extent apparently. Though that's only to an extent. The hero killer sneers as he counters Akaguro's argument, but not all so-called heroes are like that, and practically spits out the last part, certainly not ones like Endeavor. Akaguro's eyes widen at the mention of the number 2 ranked hero. Certainly a hero who climbed to such heights couldn't be doing a poor job. Endeavor had brought down nearly as many villains as All Might over the years, the two practically incompatible with one another. Not to mention his indomitable firepower. Akaguro's curiosity gets the better of him and he forces himself to ask, what's wrong with Endeavor? What isn't wrong with that dumpster fire? Stain snarls with what can only be pure unbridled hatred for the number 2 hero. Akaguro flinches back at the sudden shout, more than startled by the hero killer's fury. He has no regard for civilian lives. He only cares about his placement in the hero rankings like it's some sort of leaderboard in a game. Spit flies from Stain's mouth as he provides his criticisms before landing one final venomous hiss. He's a fraud. Akaguro stares wide-eyed at the hero killer, pondering the criticisms to himself. He hadn't considered the compine between Endeavor and All Might for the top spot in the rankings as an actual motivation for either of the heroes, but now he can see with a bit of hindsight what the rivalry means to Endeavor based on past interviews. Even so, Akaguro shakes off his disturbed thoughts and chooses to look for the best in heroes. He asks quietly under his breath, but what does it matter so long as he's saving people and stopping bad guys? He hadn't expected Stain to hear him nor actually provide an answer. But the hero killer does. Stain sighs like what he says next is common knowledge. Ulterior motives are what separates the good guys from the bad guys, kid, but it's the first time such a thought crossed Akaguro's mind. And it resonates. Oh, Akaguro mulls over that statement and begins to understand. At least a little. It's a bit like his mother explained to him once about men doing her favors in his father's absence. They had expected something in return instead of doing those things out of the goodness of their hearts. Which is why I bothered to patch you up and bring you back here. Stain draws Akaguro's attention again. He's holding up a familiar notebook. Tell me about this. The cover reads, Hero Analysis for the Future Number 12. He gasps, recognizing it as his own recordings of hero fights and analysis. But he's much too ashamed and embarrassed by its contents and purpose to admit to anything. So he instead tries to brush it off, avoiding eye contact. That's nothing. Just a stupid dream. Stain's infamous grunt of amusement returns in substitution of a raised eyebrow. He flips open the cover, flipping and thumbing through the scribblings on all of the pages. I had plenty of time to read through it. I'd say it's certainly something. And stupid isn't the word for it. Akaguro watches warily when he thinks for a fleeting moment that Stain sounds impressed. Shaking off that thought and berating himself for being so uncharacteristically egotistical, he returns his gaze to his lap. I can't be a hero anyways, so you don't have to worry about judging me. He instead chooses self-pity over pride. Stain glances up from the notebook in his hands to ask, and why is that? Akaguro's fingers curl inwards, balling his hands into fists. If he hadn't cut his nails recently, he's sure they would have dug into his skin and made his palms bleed. His frustration cuts himself short. His body shakes for a different reason now. He has to shut his eyes to force back the waterworks as he explains, I've got a villain's quirk. He keeps his eyes closed, unwillingly to see what kind of expression Stain must be making. Akaguro had seen them all. The looks of disgust, pity, heck, even fear. Afraid to catch his villainy like it's some kind of disease. Or that the villain may use his villainous quirk on them. Though he doubts the hero killer would feel that last one, Stain doesn't seem like the type to get scared. He hadn't considered it until now, but perhaps Stain will cut him down. Akaguro has had his fair share of beatdowns for his quirk that he wouldn't be surprised if his condition got him killed. Imagine Akaguro's surprise when he hears Stain say, that doesn't appear to matter if your intentions don't align with that of a criminal's. Akaguro's eyes snap open in shock, head whipping up to stare at the hero killer. Stain's face looks dead serious. He's not pulling some sort of cruel trick. Akaguro shakes his head as he repeats what he's been told his entire life, why you can't be a hero with a villain's quirk. A quirk means nothing. Will and courage is everything. The will to act. Stain speaks with such absolute certainty that the words cut deeper into Akaguro than if the hero killer were to use his katana. There's a strong conviction in the man's voice that makes Akaguro's heart beat like a war drum. Stain is practically saying the desire to save someone is more important than the ability to do so. A hero is made by their heart, not their power. The confirmation is spoken in Stain's own words. But unless you're strong like All Might, then how can you stop bad guys? Akaguro's brain is boggled over the prospect of being able to stand on the same footing as the number one hero. Not everyone is as strong as All Might, but Stain reminds Akaguro that there are indeed other heroes not like All Might. There are heroes not in the top 10 who still make a major difference in society. Underground heroes who don't even receive credit and remain out of the spotlight have quirks less suitable for high-stake combat. Maybe Stain is right. That's what weeds out the difference between the weak and the strong, and then the hero killer adds that. Akaguro finds himself staring at the open palms of his hands. They aren't as massive as All Might's. They're hardly even calloused. I don't know what to do without a powerful quirk though. Malaise melts the boy's voice to a low whisper. There are other strengths you can find within yourself. Stain taps the side of his head with a finger from his free hand. If that gesture isn't enough, he also holds up the hero notes that he's holding in his other hand for extra emphasis, your analytic abilities, if you were to hone them. Akaguro stares at the hardcover of the book as he processes the hero killer's words. As though he can hear the negative argumentative thoughts within the boy's head, Stain adds, if you knew how to fight, you wouldn't have ended up like you did last night. Akaguro involuntarily sits up straight, a little more than a flinch. But then he remembers that Stain isn't his mom or a teacher. And that even if he wanted to hide his wounds, the man had cleaned and wrapped them himself. Oh, that. The boy stares down at the mummified state of his body as he recalls the events leading up to now. They're stronger than me, he shrugs slightly. Only because you lack the conviction to fight back. Stain's grunt is without humor this time. But Akaguro shakes his head in denial. I don't want to bully anyone. I just want to stop them from bullying others. He grabs handfuls of the bedsheet sprawled across him in frustration. He clings to the fabric, grip tightening. Stain stares at the boy incredulously. You took that beating for someone else. He considers how heroic of an action that is to sacrifice oneself. He begins believing that he made the right decision in bringing the boy back to his home. But Akaguro misinterprets the question. He huffs, a cross between an unamused laugh and a scoff. I'm pretty good at being a punching bag, and shrugs again. He doesn't let go of the bedsheets. Stain smiles ever so slightly, a small shape on his lips that's easily missed. There's hope for the future generation of heroes yet. The boy had proven without realizing it himself that he can save lives. All it takes is the selfless heart of a true hero, not power. Stain drops the hero analysis notebook on the bed as he asks, what's your name, kid? Akaguro starts to answer. But stops short. He remembers that Stain is the hero killer. A villain. Having already started to say the first syllable of his name, he works with that to come up with something else on the fly, Akatani. The fake name sounds foreign and strange on his tongue as he tests it. Then he notices Stain waiting to hear the rest. Akaguro scrambles to come up with the rest of his newly crafted alias and uses his stalled substitute for, to do so. Akatani Mikumo. Stain stares with what can only be described as a deadpan look. Having witnessed the flailing and brainstorming, he isn't easily fooled. You're lying. His tone holds a warning that Akaguro not try withholding the truth again. Sorry. The boy recoils at Stain's tone as he apologizes. Realizing he has no other choice, he swallows his nerves in order to push him down and provides his real name, Izuku Midoriya. Suddenly, the boy before the hero killer is entirely different from Shitsume Akaguro. Rather, it's Akaguro who has taken the role of his past mentor, becoming the hero killer. The kid on the cot is the one he fought in the alley. The one he vaguely remembers fighting a second time. His glimpse into the past blends with the future. His memory, his recollection, is hazy and malformed like the rest of his mind. Stain continues staring at Izuku with a suspicious eye. His gaze is fixated on the green curls atop the boy's head. Midoriya. Izuku's actual name sounds faker than Akatani Mikumo. But Stain doesn't test it. He accepts the name with a nod before asking, do you wish to be a hero? A true hero. Izuku's grip on the bedsheets loosen ever so slightly. He looks up at Stain. The glint in his eyes that the hero killer had seen before has returned. Yes, even the boy's voice holds the conviction he has in his stare. Stain's smile returns, but this time, it's much more noticeable. Then, become my apprentice. Izuku bristles at the hero killer's offer. I'll give you the proper tutelage to become what you desire to be. Better than the frauds. Izuku feels queasy. Like he's going to be sick. He's always wanted to be a hero, not a villain. How a villain could teach him how to be anything other than a criminal, he just doesn't buy it. But then again, this isn't the average villain. Stain at least seems to have morals and values. Plus there's no telling what the man will do if Izuku were to turn down the offer. I don't know. He nervously fiddles with the cloth on the bed while trying to stall for time with his answer. Izuku Midoriya, but Stain demands the boy's undivided attention. His voice booms like thunder, his words like lightning striking the boy in the heart as he says, you can become a hero. Izuku had never heard that before. From anyone. Not even his own mother. His heart stops for more than a second, skipping a few beats. There's no stopping the waterworks. If Stain were the storm, Izuku's tears are the monsoon. He sobs heavily and uncontrollably. The boy bends over, trembling hands shifting from the bedsheets to his chest. A maelstrom of emotion overwhelms him, barely contained by the bandages bound around his body. He had always dreamt of the chance to become a hero. To hear someone say it's possible. Why did it have to be you? Izuku cries in between fits of wailing. Spit and snot streams with tears down his face as he curls into himself even further. He wishes he could have heard his mother say that. Or the boy he grew up with, Kaken. Maybe it'd have been too much to hope for his idol to tell him what he always wanted to hear. Perhaps in another life he'd have been spurred on by All Might himself, he imagines. But to hear it from a villain. One that has killed heroes and continues to do so. He's conflicted by the onslaught of emotion. Izuku feels the aching from within battling for dominion over his physical pains. It's just too much. He gradually lifts his head to look at the man in front of him. No longer does he see a figure of death. His heart begins beating again. Like a rebirth, Izuku uncurls from his balled-up shape. He wants to get stronger. He wants to become a hero. He wants to know why someone would want the same of him. Why call yourself Stain? Izuku's tears make the smudged figure appear as such, stained into his sight. Stain stands taller, losing his hunch. He has a presence that towers over Izuku. I want to leave a lasting mark on society. A deeply rooted one that can't be wiped away, no matter how hard they try. The hero killer speaks with a strong-willed spirit that holds extreme conviction. He stains the soul of Izuku Midoriya, a stain. Shitsu Makiguro reopens his eyes, remembering the crux of his origin even if it's been tainted. That boy, Izuku Midoriya, is just like him. A desire to be a hero. A villainous quirk. A villainous appearance. The blades attached to the man's arms glisten in the glow of the murky liquid. He recalls Izuku's chainsaw form. They're two sides of the same coin. He stirs from within the confines of his preservation tank. Finally, Akagaro feels awake again. Stain has a reason to return. If he hopes to recover his memory and continue to carry out his mission, he feels he needs to find and confront Izuku Midoriya. The pointed tips of his bladed arms pierce the glass of the tube he's in, chipping into it until it cracks fully. Akaguro breaks free, blue liquid spilling out with him. Escaping from his containment, he uses his katanas to hack off the wires and everything else holding him back like puppet strings. As his dripping form rises up, shrouded by darkness, he finds the resolve to his conviction. Katana Man must face Chainsaw Man. Kyoko swings her katana down, practicing chopping motions. It feels good to hold a sword in her hands again. It's not only a weapon that she feels she's able to fall back on should she not be able to rely on her quirk, but it reminds her of the lessons she gave Izuku. A swipe of the blade curves and cuts at an unnatural angle. She sighs. That was a sloppy swing. Anytime her thoughts trail back to the boy, she loses her edge. So she does what she does best when she needs to focus. She sings. Out here in the wide open space of a forest with nobody to overhear her, she has no problem doing so. Besides, this is a training camp. Honing her voice is just as important as her quirk. The girl chops with her katana again, this time humming to the whistle of the sharpness slicing through air. Birds begin to join in, chirping along. She uses both of her hands to wield her sword, holding them together in front of her. Quote, and it's then that she ends her song, reopening her eyes. Izuku is still absent from the rest of them. And yet, they all train as hard as they can. The devil you know. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.